Everything was fine. There in the lobby she sat, deep in an overstuffed blood-red armchair, deep in a lurid movie magazine. A fellow of my age in tweeds, the genre of the place had changed overnight to a spurious country squire atmosphere, was staring at my Lolita over his dead cigar and stale newspaper. She wore her professional white socks and saddle Oxfords, and that bright print frock with the square throat. A splash of jaded lamplight brought out the golden down on her warm brown limbs. There she sat, her legs carelessly high-crossed, and her pale eyes skimming along the lines with every now and then a blink. Bill's wife had worshipped him from afar long before they ever met. In fact, she used to secretly admire the famous young actor as he ate Sundays in Schwab's drugstore. Nothing could have been more childish than her snub nose, freckled face, or the purplish spot on her naked neck where a fairy-tale vampire had feasted, or the unconscious movement of her tongue exploring a touch of rosy rash around her swollen lips. Nothing could be more harmless than to read about Jill, an energetic starlet who made her own clothes and was a student of serious literature. Nothing could be more innocent than the part of that glossy brown hair with that silky sheen on the temple. Nothing could be more naive. But what sickening envy the lecherous fellow, whoever he was. Come to think of it, he resembled a little my Swiss uncle Gustave, also a great admirer of Le Découvert, would have experienced had he known that every nerve in me was still anointed and ringed with the feel of her body, the body of some immortal daemon disguised as a female child. Was Pink Pig Mr. Swoon absolutely sure my wife had not telephoned? He was. If she did, would he tell her we had gone to Aunt Claire's place? He would indeedy. I settled the bill and roused low from her chair. She read to the car. Still reading, she was driven to a so-called coffee shop a few blocks south. Oh, she ate all right. She even laid aside her magazine to eat. But a queer dullness had replaced her usual cheerfulness. I knew little Lo could be very nasty, so I braced myself and grinned and waited for a squall. I was unbathed, unshaven, and had had no bowel movement. My nerves were a jangle. I did not like the way my little mistress shrugged her shoulders and distended her nostrils when I attempted casual small talk. Had Phyllis been in the know before she joined her parents in Maine? I asked with a smile. Look, said Lo, making a weeping grimace. Let us get off the subject. I then tried, also unsuccessfully, no matter how I smacked my lips, to interest her in the road map. Our destination was, let me remind my patient reader, whose meek temper Lo ought to have copied, the gay town of Leppingville, somewhere near a hypothetical hospital. The destination was in itself a perfectly arbitrary one, as alas so many were to be, and I shook in my shoes as I wondered how to keep the whole arrangement plausible, and what other plausible objectives to invent after we had taken in all the movies in Leppingville. More and more uncomfortable did Humbert feel. It was something quite special, that feeling, an oppressive, hideous constraint, as if I was sitting with the small ghost of somebody I had just killed. As she was in the act of getting back into the car, an expression of pain flitted across Lo's face. It flitted again, more meaningfully, as she settled down beside me. No doubt she reproduced it that second time for my benefit. Foolishly I asked her what was the matter. Nothing, you brute, she replied. You what? I asked. She was silent. Leaving Bryceland, loquacious Lo was silent. Cold spiders of panic crawled down my back. This was an orphan. This was a lone child, an absolute waif with whom a heavy-limbed, foul-smelling adult had had strenuous intercourse 3 times that very morning. Whether or not the realization of a lifelong dream had surpassed all expectation, it had, in a sense, overshot its mark and plunged into a nightmare. I had been careless, stupid, and ignoble. And let me be quite frank, somewhere at the bottom of that dark turmoil I felt the writhing of desire again, so monstrous was my appetite for that miserable nymphette. Mingled with the pangs of guilt was the agonizing thought that her mood might prevent me from making love to her again as soon as I found a nice country road where to park in peace. In other words, poor Humbert was dreadfully unhappy, and while steadily and inanely driving toward Leppingville, he kept racking his brains for some quip under the bright wing of which he might dare turn to his seatmate. It was she, however, who broke the silence. "Oh, squash squirrel," she said. "What a shame." "Yes, isn't it? eager, hopeful hum. "Let us stop at the next gas station," Lowe continued. "I want to go to the washroom." "We shall stop wherever you want," I said. And then, as a lovely, lonely, supercilious grove, oaks, I thought, American trees at that stage were beyond me, started to echo greenly the rush of our car, a red and ferny road on our right turned its head before slanting into the woodland, and I suggested we might perhaps— "Drive on!" my Lowe cried shrilly. "Righto, take it easy. Down, poor beast, down." I glanced at her. Thank God the child was smiling. "You chump," she said, sweetly smiling at me. "You revolting creature. I was a daisy fresh girl, and look what you've done to me. I ought to call the police and tell them you raped me. Oh, you dirty, dirty old man." Was she just joking? An ominous hysterical note ran through her silly words. Presently, making a sizzling sound with her lips, she started complaining of pains. Said she could not sit. Said I'd torn something inside her. The sweat rolled down my neck, and we almost ran over some little animal or other that was crossing the road with tail erect, and again my vile-tempered companion called me an ugly name. When we stopped at the filling station, she scrambled out without a word, and was a long time away. Slowly, lovingly, an elderly friend with a broken nose wiped my windshield. They do it differently at every place, from chamois cloth to soapy brush. This fellow used a pink sponge. She appeared at last. "Look," she said in that neutral voice that hurt me so, "give me some dimes and nickels. I want to call Mother in that hospital. What's the number?" "Get in," I said. "You can't call that number." "Why?" "Get in and slam the door." She got in and slammed the door. The old garage man beamed at her. I swung onto the highway. "Why can't I call my mother if I want to?" "Because," I answered, "your mother is dead."